You've probably done this before. Counting steps, replaying a sentence in your head, holding on to something you know you don't need. And it felt small, harmless, almost invisible. But there are moments when these behaviors stop being casual and start feeling like something is controlling you from the inside. Not loudly, not dramatically, just persistent, like a quiet pressure you can't turn off. There are people who don't count because they want to, but because stopping feels dangerous. People who talk out loud not for focus, but because silence isn't actually silent to them. And the unsettling part is, from the outside, it all just looks a little weird. Easy to dismiss, easy to judge. But inside, it's a completely different experience, Sehon, that feels logical, necessary, even urgent. So here's the question you don't usually ask. What if these behaviors aren't random at all? What if they're signals? Not of weakness, but of a brain trying, in its own flawed way, to protect itself. And if you've ever had a moment where something you didn't feel like a choice, just something you had to do, then stay with this, because you might recognize more than you expect. Most people don't notice when a behavior quietly crosses the line. It starts small. You count a few things. You talk to yourself once in a while. You keep an item just in case. You stay up a little too late or sleep a little too long. Nothing alarming. Nothing that feels like a problem. But over time, something shifts, and the behavior stops feeling optional. It becomes something you have to do, even if it doesn't make sense anymore. There are people who can't walk up a staircase without counting every single step, not because they enjoy it, but because their mind convinces them that if they don't, something bad might happen. There are people who speak out loud, not to organize their thoughts, but because their thoughts don't feel like they belong to them anymore. And from the outside, it's easy to label all of this as strange, attention-seeking, or just a personality quirk. But then you look closer. Someone is holding onto piles of objects they don't even use, yet the idea of throwing them away creates real physical anxiety. Someone else lives on a completely broken sleep cycle, awake when the world sleeps, exhausted when the day begins, and no amount of discipline seems to fix it. And the worst part, they're often told it's their fault, that they're lazy, messy, dramatic, or lacking control. But what if none of that is true? What if these behaviors aren't choices, but symptoms? What if the person isn't failing to control their actions, but their brain is failing to regulate itself? Because underneath all of this, there's a pattern. These behaviors aren't random. They're consistent, repetitive, compulsive. They come with a sense of urgency that's hard to explain unless you've felt it. It's not "I want to do this." It's "I can't not do this." And once you see it that way, something changes. Because now, instead of asking what's wrong with this person, you start asking a much more important question. What is their brain trying to deal with that I can't see? Here's where things get uncomfortable. Because once you look deeper, these behaviors stop being random habits and start revealing a very specific pattern inside the brain. None of this is accidental. It's structured. It's mechanical. And in a strange way, it's logical. Take obsessive counting. On the surface, it looks irrational, but inside the brain, there's a false link being created. If I do this, I stay safe. It's what psychologists call magical thinking, where the brain wires two unrelated things together and treats them like cause and effect. So stopping doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a risk, or take something more unsettling. When a person talks out loud because their thoughts don't feel like their own, that's not imagination. That's the brain struggling to label what is internal versus external. The system that normally says, "This voice is mine," starts glitching. And once that boundary blurs, everything that follows still feels real, just not controllable. Even hoarding follows the same hidden logic. Objects stop being objects. They become extensions of identity, memory, safety. Throwing them away doesn't feel like cleaning, it feels like losing a part of yourself. So the brain avoids the loss by keeping everything. Sleep disorders? Same pattern. The body isn't lazy, it's desynchronized. The internal clock isn't broken randomly. It's being overridden by deeper neurological shifts tied to mood and regulation. And dissociation, the feeling of watching yourself from the outside. That's not your brain failing. That's your brain pulling an emergency brake. When emotional overload gets too high, it reduces reality to protect you from it. So when you line all of this up, one thing becomes clear. These behaviors are not the problem. They are the brain's solution. Just one that went too far. Imagine this. There's a person walking up a staircase and they stop midway. Not because they're tired, but because they lost count. Now they have to go back and start again. Not for fun, not for accuracy, but because something inside them won't let them continue unless it feels right. From the outside, it looks unnecessary. From the inside, it feels non-negotiable. Or picture someone sitting alone, whispering under their breath. You might think they're rehearsing, or just thinking out loud. But in their reality, they're responding to voices, to fragmented thoughts, to something that doesn't switch off when the room goes quiet. And the strange part? It all feels completely real to them. Then there's the room. Boxes stacked in corners. Broken items. Old receipts. Things no one else would keep. You ask why they don't throw it away, and they can't give you a simple answer. Not because there isn't one, but because the feeling is too heavy to explain. It's not clutter. It's attachment. Fear. Identity. All tangled together. Somewhere else, someone hasn't slept in 2 days and feels invincible. Another person can't get out of bed after 15 hours of sleep. Same world. Completely different internal clocks. And then the most disorienting one, a person going through their day, talking, working, moving, but inside, it feels like they're watching their own life from a distance, like they're not fully inside their own body. If you were in any of these moments, what would you do? Stay silent and adapt, or fight something you can't even fully explain? And here's the part most people never stop to question. We assume these behaviors are the problem, that the counting is the issue, the talking, the hoarding, the sleepless nights, the disconnection. We treat all of it like something that needs to be fixed or eliminated. But what if that's completely backwards? What if those behaviors are actually the brain's best attempt at keeping things together, not falling apart? Because when you really look at it, every single one of these patterns is trying to solve something. The counting is trying to create certainty. In a world that feels unpredictable, the voices, as disturbing as they seem, are the brain misfiring while trying to process overwhelming internal noise. The hoarding is an attempt to hold on to stability, identity, something solid in a reality that feels fragile. Even the broken sleep cycles, they're not random. They reflect a system being pushed and pulled by forces deeper than willpower. And dissociation? That feeling of being outside yourself? That might be the most extreme example. It's not the brain checking out for no reason. It's the brain saying, "This is too much. I need to reduce the intensity or we won't handle it." So it dims reality. Not to harm you, but to protect you. But here's where it turns. The same mechanism that protects you can trap you. Because once the brain learns that this solution reduces discomfort, it keeps using it, height date, even when the original threat is gone. And over time, the solution becomes the new problem. So now you're stuck in a loop. The behavior feels necessary, but it also keeps reinforcing the fear, the anxiety, the disconnection it was trying to solve in the first place. At this point, you have two ways to see it. You can keep labeling these behaviors as flaws, as weaknesses, as something to suppress. Or you can recognize them for what they actually are: signals, clues, evidence that somewhere underneath, your system is overwhelmed, misaligned, trying too hard to protect you in the only way it knows how. And once you see it like that, you can't unsee it. So what do you actually do with all of this? Not fix yourself overnight. Not force the behavior to disappear. That approach usually makes it worse. Because if these patterns are your brain's way of protecting you, fighting them blindly is like shutting off an alarm without checking where the fire is. The real shift starts somewhere quieter. You stop asking, "How do I get rid of this?" and start asking, "What is this trying to protect me from?" That question changes everything, because now you're not attacking the symptom, you're listening to it. There are people who spend years trying to control behaviors and never once look at the pressure underneath them. The anxiety, the overload, the unresolved stress that never got processed properly. But once you see the pattern, once you understand that your brain isn't broken, it's overcompensating, you start approaching it differently. With awareness, with precision. And no, that doesn't mean everything suddenly becomes easy. But it does mean you stop working against yourself. Because the goal isn't to become someone who has no symptoms. The goal is to become someone who understands them well enough to not be controlled by them anymore. And if somewhere in this you recognized yourself, even just a little, then you don't need another explanation. You already know what your next step is.